I'm actually very happy that there's nobody else on this class but yous and me's. Because, I don't know if you have this problem where you live, but we had this problem in New York and we had this problems in Jerusalem. You're walking down the street and all of a sudden you feel something like in your foot, it's like real squishy. Are you being attacked by squirrels? Is that what that noise is?
Please go ahead. It's just little.
All right. It sounded like hundreds of little squirrels all coming up out of the. Okay. I said, forget that. I'm never coming over there. Anyhow, I used to have to fight squirrels in New York City. That was more than enough. So you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden you're really happy, and it's a nice day, and then suddenly you feel your foot gets like soft, and you look down, and you have stepped in a little gift that a dog had left on the side of the street. And now you have this all over your shoe, and you're like, what am I going to do? And you come into your meeting with only one shoe on because the other one's in a little bag now. So it's awkward. So I realized, maybe the name of this class about a homeland could very well be like stepping into something not so comfortable, because I only kind of later realized that this is a hot topic. It's a big issue. It's an issue, let's say, where a very dear friend of mine, Remy, and I maybe differ very much on this issue. Let's talk about the idea of a homeland. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at every nation in the world, if you look at any people in the world, in Africa or South America, in Europe, in Asia, everybody, their country is created by their land. In other words, if you take Italians out of Italy 4 or 5 generations later, they're no longer Italian. They're just American or they're Australian. It depends on what country they go to. But what makes them Italian is Italy. And people, therefore, are even proud enough to kill other people over land, because they have this great pride of my homeland, and therefore it go over to war as to whether or not somebody says this is my land or this is your land. And that's how countries normally are. However, there's one nation, one country that has a completely different history, and that is the Jewish people. Because if you realize, when you read the Bible, when you read the Torah, the Jewish nation became a nation in Egypt. And then they became a Torah nation in the desert. All of the people who Joshua led into the land of Canaan, the entire original IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, led by Joshua, none of them had ever been to Israel. Think about that. Not only had they never been to Israel, but they were in Egypt for over 200 years. So for 200 years, their grandpa, their grandmother was telling stories, and then the next children that were little babies, they became the grandparents and they told stories. And 200 years of slaves in Egypt being told what most people would think was just a dream, a fantasy, a make-believe from Disneyland about, oh yeah, we have a home somewhere over there, but none of us have ever been to it. but you just have to believe. And then all of a sudden, one day, this guy Moses, Mo, shows up and he starts to kick the living daylights out of the Egyptians. I mean, taking them from part to part to part, and destroys the greatest empire in the world without one gun. And suddenly, after hundreds of years, these thousands of slaves are suddenly seeing one miracle after the next, to ultimately they watch the entire sea open up in half, and they walk through it, and then they come to a mountain called Mount Sinai, and they hear and they see God give the Torah. Many of them actually died and had to come back to life because their soul could not stay in their body. And the others were literally blown away and had to be brought back. And then they come into this land and they say, hey, this is our homeland. Why? Well, because 250, 300 years ago, we had a few little family members named Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they lived in this land. Why did God create the Jews as a nation outside of its land? Hold that thought for 1 minute. Let's go to another thought. If you want to be a Buddhist, you can be a Buddhist in China. You can be a Buddhist in Pakistan. You can be a Buddhist in Brooklyn. Because to be a good Buddhist, and there are millions of very good Buddhists, to be a good Buddhist, it doesn't matter where you are. And wherever you are, that's where you sit down. That's where you find your chi. That's where you work through your chakras. That's where you do all the work of being a Buddhist. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be a good Buddhist. So why then can't we just be good Jews anywhere in the world? What difference does it make? Why do you have to be in Israel? Why can't you just be in Nigeria? Why can't I just be in New York City? Why is it so important to have a physical country? We are a spiritual people. We are people of wisdom. To do acts of kindness, you don't need to be Jewish. You just do kindness to everybody, not just to anybody, but to animals. And just as a side point, in this week's portion in the Torah, you might not notice this, but if you pay attention to it, it'll blow your mind. You know, many people today talk about protection of cruelty against animals. Many manufacturers in Europe and the United States put on their bottles that no animal testing was used to make this product. Having compassion and kindness for an animal is as if this is a new revelation. Now, over most times, people really don't care that much about their animals, especially if it's a herd. Okay, you try to keep them alive and healthy because that's how you're going to eat and that's how you're going to make money. But do you really know your animals? Do you give them names? Do you know their birthdays? Right? So we don't have that much of a connection to animals. And yet, for the first time in history, it is recorded in the Bible that Jacob, not only did he build houses for his family, he built shelters for his animals. That he showed that animals are also something that deserve kindness. In fact, I'll just digress for one more second with a mind-blowing story. One of the possibly greatest rabbis who ever lived in Jewish history. He is known in English by the name Judah the Prince. He was a direct descendant of King David. And we call him Rebbe Yehuda HaNasi. And he was personal friends with the king of Persia and the Caesar of Rome. In fact, the Caesar of Rome, Anthony, remember Cleopatra and Anthony? Anthony and Rebbe were the best of friends. It says that when Anthony died, Rebbe could not stop crying because of the death of the Roman Caesar. Okay, so the story is one day, Rebbe is walking by the temple in Jerusalem, and the little lamb is running away from one of the Kohanim, from one of the priests, because the little lamb was supposed to be taken for an offering in the temple. And the little lamb runs behind the rabbi's legs as if looking for help. And the rabbi lifts up the little lamb and gives the lamb to the priest and says to the lamb, "You were created for this. Why are you running away?" And guess what? Because that rabbi did not have compassion for that little animal, he suffered illness for 14 years. So to be able to appreciate and to be kind to everything that God creates, you don't need a homeland. You can do it anywhere. So before we go down on that, let's go a little bit back. What is a Jew? Who is a Jew, right? Interesting question. Do you eat Jews with forks or with spoons, right? What are Jews? I mean, I know a lot of times when a person sneezes, it sounds like he says, "I Jew," right? So what actually is a Jew? So here is some very fascinating information. The original word for Jew has nothing to do with Jews. The first time you see in the Bible the name Jew, but in the Hebrew, of course, is actually a woman's name. Her name was Yehudit, because in Hebrew to say Jew is Yehudi. In almost every country in the world, like in German, it's Yud. In Chinese, it's Yotai. It's always had that similar language around the world. So the female form of, or feminine form of Yehudi is Yehudit. Now, who was Yehudit? So this woman was actually one of Esav's wives. And it wasn't really her name. He lied. Esav came to his parents and said, "I want you to meet my wife, Yehudit." But it was not really her name. So why did he do this? Because the word Yehudi, Yehudit, means one who loves God. Full stop. That's what it means. The one who loves one God, not many gods, only the one God. That is already a Jew. And so he was trying to fool his family into suggesting, look, she's a very, very religious woman who really believes in God. And therefore he called her Yehudit. That's one example. Let me show you another fascinating example. We're drilling down here. That's why I'm building the elements so you'll be able to follow the whole thought here. Let's go deeper. We come to a story that happened in Iran, in Persia, what it used to be called as Persia, Paras. And in Persia, we have a miracle happens. It's the story of, in the holiday of Purim, Mordechai and Esther. And all the Jews everywhere in the world, even in Nigeria, were all going to be killed by the Persian Empire. Persian Empire controlled 120 nations around the world, and they had decreed that all the Jews were going to be killed on one day. And not only did they not get killed, but the Jews actually flipped the whole thing upside down, and the Jews were able to kill their enemies. And that became the holiday of Purim. Now, in the Bible, when it introduces the hero of the story, Mordechai, it uses the expression in Hebrew, Mordechai ha-Yehudi, which would be translated as Mordechai the Jew. That's what it would translate. Now, many people want to say that what it meant was he was from the tribe. Remember, Jews are 12 tribes, really 13. And therefore, he was from the tribe of Judah. So therefore, to say that somebody is from Judah, you would call him Judi or Yehudi, because the J and the Y interchange. So he would be called Judi or Yehudi. But guess what? Mordechai was not from the tribe of Judah. Mordechai was from the tribe of Benjamin. So therefore, he should have been called Yemini or Beni, not Yehudi. So again, the Talmud wakes up and says, what is this? Why are you calling him Yehudi when he's from the tribe of Benjamin? And it gives the same answer. Because to be a Jew means that you believe in God. And therefore, even though Mordechai was from the tribe of Benjamin, the Bible wanted you to know that God, who looks inside every single person's mind and heart and knows who we really are, knew that this was somebody who was real. He was what you see on the outside is coming from the inside. He was for real. That's the label. So now we find out that the original definition of being a Jew doesn't necessarily have anything to do with coming from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's just a person who believes in one God. But let's go forward. Now the next level. Abraham becomes the first person to believe in one God. So therefore, this idea of believing in one God now becomes not a nation, but a family. It's a family. You're either part of the family or you're not part of the family. But this is not a normal family because it's actually two things at the same time. It's a family, but it's also a commitment to God. So therefore, anybody who came along and wanted to become a part of the family, right? I mean, just imagine all of a sudden one day, you know, you get a knock at your door and you open up the door and they're like 10 people from Poland with suitcases at your door. Hi, we're here. Like, who are you? Oh, we're your family. We're moving in. Make room. Right? And they only speak Polish. That makes it even harder. Okay. So you would like, what are you talking about? You're not my family. You're out of your mind. Right? Because you're either family or you're not family. But it doesn't work like that as Jews. If somebody really is drawn to God, they can somehow magically become part of this family. Why? Because unlike normal families, where you are only a member of the family if you come out of the mommy and the daddy that's part of everybody's mommy and daddy, here, our family is working on a level of souls. That's why when Jacob goes down to Egypt, it doesn't say he went with 70 people. He went with 70 souls. And since every human being has a soul, these souls can weld and become part of Abraham's family. That's why traditionally, if somebody does convert to become a Jew, he or she is called the son of Abraham or the son of Sarah. And they are 100% a Jew because there are two types of Jews. There is a Jew by birth and there is a Jew by choice. And a Jew by choice is really much higher than a Jew by birth. Because a Jew by birth, sometimes we don't wake up to who we are or what we have. But a Jew by choice is somebody who's very awake and therefore much more blessed and much more gifted for what they can do. So now you have a family that's both family in the traditional sense and family in the spiritual sense. And once they come together, there's no more difference. In fact, I would tell you that maybe 40% of all Judaism today owes its greatness to those Jews that converted to Judaism. Some of the greatest converts from the Roman Empire, their children became some of the greatest rabbis of all time, because every human being can rise to that level. Now, next question, why is it important to have a land? Okay, we have this wonderful humanity. We have something that the whole world is welcome to. You know, if it's, you don't have to become Jewish, but it's open if you really want to become. If you're crazy enough to want to be a Jew, you can do that, you know, but you don't have to do that because God blesses all human beings and God creates all human beings. And as long as you're really who you are, you'll go to heaven if you're a Jew or not. Jews don't have exclusive real estate in heaven. It's for every human being. It's actually even for animals. Every soul can go to heaven. It's all a question of how you were as a human being yourself. That's all that matters. You're not going to go upstairs and say, hey, look, I'm a Jew. And they're going to like, let him go through the express lane. No, everybody's going to stand there and have to explain who they were and what they were. So why is it so important to have a land? So now we come up to this issue. The first answer is, why is it important to have a body? I mean, yeah, it's very nice. We get used to it, right? We kind of like had it, I think, our whole lives even, You were born with this, and it just continues to grow. And then certainly around my age, you hit a certain point, and then it starts to not grow, At one point, you're a little kid, and then you start to grow hair, and it's got a lot of red hair. And then all of a sudden it has no color, and then probably a few more years, even no hair, right? You're a little kid, you have no teeth, and then the little teeth grow in, and then you get like my age. I had no teeth. So, right, there's like this cycle of what life is. But what do you really need this for? Why is this so important? What am I supposed to do with this? If it's a question about being spiritual, just be like energy. Just be holy energy. Why do you need this? In fact, this holds back that energy. This is like having something heavy. Why not just be an angel? Just fly, just think, and you're in another world. Many people in this world wonder, is there life on other planets? I'm sure you've heard this conversation. Aliens. I always say the real question is there life on this planet? That's the real question, because not many people on this planet are alive. They've been given the gift of becoming a human, and they've turned themselves into animals. That's not called being alive. So, but let's say whatever. However, in Jewish tradition, we believe there are 180,000 other planets with intelligent life. Not just one other planet, 180,000 other planets with intelligent life. Now imagine if you could travel there, and you can travel there. If you were not stuck inside this body, you could travel there. All you would need to do is think, and poof, you would be there within a minute. So who needs the body? So here's the answer. When God wanted to give the Torah into this world, the angels complained and said, you're taking the holy, 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 holy Torah. You're taking kadosh, kedusha, real sanctity, and giving it to these bozos, these earthlings made out of clay with a little energy inside of them. This is what you're going to do? Why don't you just take the Torah and put it in the mud? It's just about the same as giving it to people. They're going to screw it up big time. And we did. The first temple was destroyed. The second temple was destroyed. We were shot all over the world. Look at you guys, right? Once upon a time, you were in the tribe of God. And the next thing you know, poof, you're in Nigeria. Poof, I'm in New York City. So I mean, what is this all about? So how did Moses answer God against the angels? He said, it says in the Bible, do not steal. No angel would ever dream of stealing. It's not even in their framework. What do you mean don't steal? Yick. It would be like saying to somebody, don't eat vomit. Who would eat vomit? It would make you sick. You say to an angel, steal, it's to him, it's like eating vomit. How could I possibly steal? To steal is the greatest violation of God, because it makes an assumption that I'm taking it for me. But wait a minute, God gave it to that person. What, am I more powerful and wiser than God that I'm going to take it from that person? But yet humans have a desire to steal. And so especially when nobody's looking, except of course God looks all the time, but we don't think about that. But when a person has a desire to steal, and then says, you know what, I really, really would like to steal that thing, but I'm not going to do it because I want to show God, I really love you, God. I really love the life you give me. I really love the fact I can breathe. I really love the fact I have food, that I have friends, that I have family. I really want to say thank you. So I'm going to say thank you by not stealing. An angel can't do that. We can do that. So having a body allows us to bring the highest, holiest in the world or the universe down into the darkest part of the most physical existence where we don't even know if there is God. We are deep, deep inside the mines, inside the mountains. And therefore, if we can create light there, that's greater light than any angel can create. And it's the same thing now with why we need a homeland. Because a homeland is an opportunity to show what it really means to be holy in real life. Not somebody who sits up in a mountain and talks about very beautiful spiritual things, but somebody in the real world. I'm going to share with you something that will blow your mind. I mean, blow your mind. This is a Talmud says this. As you know, the land of Israel was divided among 10 tribes because 2 tribes remained on the outside, Manasseh and Gad. Ah, your tribe, Gad. See what happened? You didn't come in, now you got in trouble. Shame on you. Anyhow.
No, we've got our share. It was reshared.
Okay, all right. So you can make up for it. Come on home now.
Okay.
However, what happened is they had the land was divided into 10 parts. And people from all the nations of the world would come because they would hear that the King Solomon had built a temple in Jerusalem. And this temple had fire that would come down out of heaven and consume the offerings. And it would have people who were talking prophecy. You know, we talk about prophets. You know, in the land of Israel, there were cities. You were not allowed to live in them if you were not a prophet. People didn't go to doctors. People went to prophets. And the prophets would look at your soul and say, yes, you don't have a mezuzah on your door. That's why you're sick. Put on a mezuzah and you'll get better. These were the prophets. There were something like 25 million prophets in the land of Israel. It was regular life. So now imagine you're coming from, I don't know, you're coming from Mesopotamia, and you've heard about these amazing, amazing people led by King David and King Solomon in the land of Israel, and you're going on a vacation to see this. You come to Jerusalem, you can't imagine what you're seeing. But you know what? Here's an amazing thing. The Talmud tells us that of all the visitors to Israel that said, you know what, I love these people and I want to become one of them, which tribe influenced them the most? Not Judah and not Benjamin. Those were the 2 tribes that owned the area of the land where Jerusalem and the temple is. That is not what impressed them. Yes, that was like going to a Steven Spielberg movie. That was like going to Hollywood. You know, that was like unbelievable, unbelievable. But that's not what changed them. What changed them? Well, there was another tribe. Not a fancy, not a famous tribe, but a tribe called Zevulun. Who? Yeah, one of the 12 tribes, Zevulun. Now, Zevulun, what was he famous for? Or what did he do? These were sailors. They had the coastline of Israel along the Mediterranean. They built boats. They went overseas. They did commerce. They did trading. They did all of these kind of things. And they had the port cities. Now, I'm sure you've been to a port city. I've been to many, many port cities. You go to, for example, in Italy, you go to Brindisi, you go to any of these port cities, you go to France, you go to Marseille. I want to tell you something. I'm sure you know this. Even in Brooklyn, wherever you have boats coming in and going out, that's where you have the most amount of crime. That's where you have drug deals. That's where the weapons are coming in. That's where the prostitutes are trying to grab the sailors. That's where you have stolen products that are being moved all around. It is the biggest hub of crime. And when these people came to the Jewish ports, what did they find? They found a word that I know that you know and love. They found a Beit Midrash was built on the pier. It was right on the pier. And when the sailors were not on the boats, they were praying and studying Torah. And there was no crime at all. And that's what moved people, because they looked and saw this in real life, not overwhelming magic of Jerusalem, but real life, real people. And they stopped and thought, well, what would it be like in the port city in my country? Well, what's going on there? Would I walk there 11 o'clock at night alone? I don't think so. And here, the streets were without any crime. It was filled with wisdom, prayer. Everyone who had scales for weighing things were honest scales. They didn't have different weights that they slipped on to fool people. Everything was honest. And that touched people in their heart, because that shows you to be a holy person is not to go climb up on a mountain. It's very nice to climb on a mountain, by the way. But to be a holy person is to go to work, to build a building, or to sell things, but to do it honestly. And not because you are afraid you're going to get caught by the police. In fact, you don't need the police, because you become a human angel. The idea of stealing becomes repulsive to you. And if you lived in a community where it made you sick even to think about stealing, suddenly you transform your whole community. You become human angels, which are much greater than real angels. And as human angels, this is what your children see. This is what your children grow up with. Your children begin to tell stories. You know, I'll tell you an interesting thing, because as Jews, we all love to tell stories. So I'm going to tell you a story about a rabbi about 150 years ago, known as the Chafetz Chaim. He lived in an area where they had a lot of problems with the Russians. And there was a young Jewish man who was on trial as a Russian spy, which was just a complete lie. And the rabbi came to the court in order to give testimony that this man was really a very good man. And the rabbi was old, little old Jewish guy with a long white beard, whatever. And he walks into the courtroom, and everybody, Jewish or not, everybody saw a saint had walked into the room, and everybody stood up in respect. And the judge couldn't believe it. So the judge calls up the lawyers and says, "Who is this man?" And one of the lawyers says, "What? You don't know who the Chafetz Chaim is? You don't know who this man is?" And he starts to tell stories about this judge. He says, this man once had a robber come into his house and was stealing things. And when the rabbi walked in and the robber saw him, the robber ran out the door. And the rabbi ran after the robber yelling, "Do you need anything else?" And then the lawyer tells another story. He said that the rabbi was going to send a letter to the United States, and he put a stamp on the letter, I don't know, worth whatever. And all of a sudden, one of the rabbi's students came and said, "Rabbi, I'm going to the United States. I will take your letter for you." So the rabbi took the stamp and he ripped it up, because he didn't want to steal 2 cents from the government. Anyhow, so the lawyer tells another story like this and another story. Finally, the judge says, "Stop. Tell me something. Tell me, you're an intelligent lawyer. Do you really believe these stories?" And the lawyer says, "No, I don't. I don't believe them. But I have a question for you, Judge. How come they don't tell these stories about you?" So whether or not the stories are true or not true, it doesn't matter. But there has to be something very special about a person that people would even tell such stories about them. So this is something we can ask ourselves. What kind of stories do they say about me behind my back? What do they say about you? What do your kids say about you? And that's something that's all in your hands. And by living in this world and making the mundane, the regular daily life holy, that brings godliness down into the world. And that's why, if you'll forgive me, the land of Israel is a magical land. It's very nice to maybe create another country, Igbo land, which there's nothing wrong with it. Why not? And you know what? There have been other Jewish countries. There was a Jewish country on the Rock of Gibraltar in the 1400s. It became a Jewish country. There was a country that Stalin created on the Chinese-Mongolese border. It's still there to this day, except they use Yiddish. But the names of the city in the middle of Mongolia, Russia, Siberia, are these Yiddish names. And they tried to make a Jewish country in Western Australia. And in fact, originally they were going to make the country in Uganda and Kenya. The British were going to make that the next state of Israel. But it doesn't work, because at the end of the day, it's only what God decides. And God chose Jerusalem, and God chose the Holy Land. And when, God willing, you will be here, no matter how holy you are now, you will become more holy, because there's vibrations that come out of the land, and they will change you. God willing, they will change you for the best. And that is the miracle of the land of Israel. And it's more than that. And this is where we'll stop with a little something from the Kabbalah. When God created the Garden of Eden, it was a vessel of light. And the light smashed, and the pieces of this vessel flew between time and space. And they landed in Nigeria, and they landed in Mississippi, and they landed in Argentina. They landed everywhere. And then we come into these lands and we swallow, we absorb that piece of light. And when we come back, and all of us from the four corners of the world reunite in Israel, each one of us brings a different piece, so that that whole piece actually is made as one. And that piece is called the third Beit HaMikdash, the third temple, which will not be a Jewish temple. It will be a temple for all human beings in the world. But those of us who will be living here, God willing, which will include all of you, will be the ones that will be able to welcome the rest of the world into God's home. And that's why we need a land in Israel. So I bless you all, that your fellow Igbo do not get upset with you. Just say it was this stupid Jewish guy from Jerusalem, and that you don't believe anything he said. And, you know, we just had nothing else to do on a Sunday afternoon. So just have faith. I know you have faith. Be patient. I know that Michael has been back in touch with you in terms of finding organizations. And I look forward someday to really being able to really hug, not just through Zoom, but in Jerusalem. Jerusalem. All right. Thank you all very much. And I'll see you, God willing, next week. Bye for now. להתראות. Shalom, shalom. Bye.